On Martin Luther King Jr. Day, America honors one of the most impactful men in our history, whose legacy continues to inspire. Wanted to bring you some of his powerful words from a lesser-known speech titled, "What is Your Life's Blueprint?" And we've all heard the I Have a Dream speech, which continues to inspire a lot of us, though has become weirdly controversial in some circles. But what is your life's blueprint was from October 26, 1967, and he delivered the speech to high school students in Philadelphia. This was 4 years after the I Have a Dream address and just a few months before his tragic death. Here are some highlights of the speech published on the Beacon Press YouTube channel.
Number one in your life's blueprint should be a deep belief in your own dignity, your own worth, and your own somebodyness. Don't allow anybody to make you feel that you are nobody. Secondly, in your life's blueprint, you must have as a basic principle the determination to achieve excellence in your various fields of endeavor. Finally, in your life's blueprint must be a commitment to the eternal principles of beauty, love, and justice. Don't allow anybody to pull you so low as to make you hate them. But we must keep moving. We must keep going. If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep moving.
My goodness. We don't have somebody like that today. We don't have somebody who can inspire everyone. Such a powerful message. It resonates with most of us as much today as it did back in 1967 as we remember MLK's lasting legacy. There's a reason we pause once a year to remember him. Back with me now, Rich Lowry and Charles C.W. Cooke of National Review. So beautiful, so inspirational, and sadly, so forgotten, right? In the way that just the so-called movement for equal rights and justice has continued today. It doesn't bear any resemblance to that. I mean, he had the temerity in that speech to talk about have a basic determination to achieve excellence. You would be told you were racist if you said that to a group of children of color today, to try to have the nerve to tell them to achieve excellence, as opposed to talking about how they're really going to be hampered in their effort to do that because they were born into a racist society. What do you make of it? Charles, you've written beautifully about your love for this country, how you fell in love with America. What do you make of MLK's legacy in it and what's happened to it all these years later?
Well, I think one of the greatest things about the United States is that it came with an instruction manual, which most countries don't. That instruction manual is in a few places. You have the Declaration of Independence, you have the Constitution, you have the Federalist Papers, and then you have the second edition of the instruction manual in the Civil War. But it's an instruction manual nevertheless. It's quite difficult in a place like, say, Sweden, to ask the question, are we living up to our national creed? Because there isn't one. That's not to say the Swedish aren't good people or that it's not a nice place to live, but there's nothing you can really grab onto. And Martin Luther King grabbed pretty hard and correctly onto a set of promises, he called it a promissory note, that had been limited in its application. You know, where I have a big problem with the American left's historical analysis and modern political output is that it insists, in, it must be said, much the same way as did many Confederates, that America is either built on sand or built on a lie. But I don't think it is. And if you listen to Martin Luther King's speeches, neither did he. What he thought at root, like Frederick Douglass before him, at least in Frederick Douglass's later years, was that America was built atop a beautiful set of presuppositions, but that they had been assiduously denied to certain people. He was right, they had been, and it needed intervention to fix. But that intervention came and was made possible only because of the integrity of the underlying ideas. And I think when people try to strip away all of that scaffolding, they're actually pushing Martin Luther King over with the rest of the edifice, because if he wanted people who were non-white, not just blacks, although blacks had obviously been very much more oppressed than everyone else, to fall heir to the promises of the founding, there has to be a promise of the founding.
You know, Rich, it occurs to me that back during MLK's time, the Civil Rights Act and so on, the people most ardently opposed to him were racists. Mm-hmm. And today, the people most ardently opposed to his message today are racists, but they style themselves as anti-racist, and yet their message bears a striking and disturbing resemblance to the ones we heard from King detractors.
Yeah. So when you played that clip, that voice, whoa, what resonance, right? That's a voice that changes the world. It's not just Martin Luther King's voice. It has such resonance in part because it has a foundation in this great tradition of African-American Christianity in this country, which is one of the most amazing stories in this country. You know, people who are brought over here in most horrific circumstances possible, and the transatlantic slave trade, whipped, humiliated, and enslaved, and they pick up Christianity, and it's an oral Christianity, right? Because no one wants them to read. Many of them are illiterate, so it's tradition based on preaching and based on music, and that's Martin Luther King was very much in that tradition, and it was a Christian advocacy. You know, he talked in that clip about never let anyone make you hate them, right? Because that's terrible for you, not just for them. And that was the power of the civil rights movement. It basically said, under Martin Luther King's leadership, you're going to spit on us, you're going to disrespect us, you're going to jail us, and we're going to love you anyway. And that was extremely powerful. And that was the other wing of it. Charlie hit very eloquently on the going back to the Declaration of Independence and American ideals, but also that Christian element was hugely important. And then to get what you're asking about, Megyn, I would say a couple things. One, he had every reason in the mid-1960s to quit on America, right? To think America was fundamentally corrupt, right? This is America of segregation and deep injustices. But he believed in America and thought it could be redeemed. And today, when in terms of racial justice and all sorts of other metrics, we're in a much better place ever in the entirety of our history, perhaps in the entirety of human history compared to any other societies. People want to quit on America, because a wrong pronoun might be used, or microaggression might be committed. And they don't believe in America. They don't believe in its ideals. And they've twisted themselves into being in, as you point out, in this position where they're the racialists, where they can't get over race, where they want people to be judged on the basis of race and iniquities to be committed in the name of race. And that's just perverse. Martin Luther King was a man of the left. You know, he wouldn't, I doubt very much if he was still with us today, he'd agree with Charlie and I, with Charlie and me on many political issues. But it's hard to believe he would be on board this kind of woke racialism that's so pervasive now in so many of our institutions.
It certainly does. His message, you heard it there, is so empowering and optimistic. You know, don't let them tell you you're nothing, basically. Don't you tell yourself you're nothing. And today, the messaging is so very different. It's why there are so many Black and brown families standing up to the messaging being handed down to their children in class. Like, how dare you tell my child he's less than, or he should feel less than, or he can't do the math, or he can't do the thing because of some imagined social inequity that we deny he's suffering from, right? It's not to say it's not in any case, but to paint with such a broad brush. He was the opposite of that, and that's why, Charles, so many, as part of this woke movement, are moving on from him. They're rejecting my dream is to see the two children and they would be judged not by the content of not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. They don't believe in that. They don't believe in the color blindness. They want to go back in a way to before King, and they're doing it at their and at the country's peril.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of problems with it. The first is, as Rich noted, that there is far less reason to criticize or dislike or even give up on the United States now than there was in the 1960s. And yet you see people doing it in a way that Martin Luther King did not, and that is perverse. The other side of it is, I think, a fashionable cynicism, a self-aware fatalism. And you see this from people such as Ta-Nehisi Coates, who essentially said in his book and many of his other writings that the United States had an original sin, which I think is true, but that there was no redemption for it. Not what Martin Luther King said, which is this original sin exists, but that it can be forgiven or overcome, but that nothing has changed and nothing can change. And in the case of Ta-Nehisi Coates, he wrote this in a book that was nominally addressed to his son. I think this is one of the worst things you could possibly tell a child. And I think it's a preposterous thing to tell a child when it was written, which was in the 2010s. Wow. This is a backsliding of sorts, and it's different in intensity and it's different in intent, but it is no less pernicious than backslidings that we have seen in the past from white supremacists who believed that there was something intrinsically wrong with people who were not white, and they could never escape from it. Whatever they did, it didn't matter. The content of their character didn't matter. Their work ethic didn't matter. That they were different and always would be. And this is a philosophy that should be rejected by absolutely everyone, partly because it is grotesque in and of itself, but mostly because it's not true.
Like many people these days, I am trying to eat healthier. And that is why I love good olive oil. And by good, I mean fresh. Olive oil packs the most flavor and healthiest nutrients when it's fresh from the farm. And that's the problem with supermarket olive oils. They're not fresh. They can sit on the shelf for many months growing stale. That's why I like my olive oil direct from small, award-winning farms, thanks to a guy named TJ Robinson, also known as the Olive Oil Hunter. He's going to make this easy for you. When I first tasted TJ's farm fresh oils, first I was skeptical. I'm like, what the hell's the difference in an olive oil? Well, I was wrong. You'll taste it yourself. They have these vibrant, kind of grassy flavors, and it's absolutely delicious on salad, veggies, pasta, meat, whatever you put olive oil on. As an introduction to his fresh pressed olive oil club, TJ's willing to send you a full-size $39 bottle of one of the world's finest artisanal olive oils for just $1. And that just helps him cover shipping. Best of all, there's never a commitment to buy anything, and you can cancel your membership at any time. Get your free $39 bottle for just $1 shipping and taste the difference freshness makes. Go to harvestfreshnow.com. harvestfreshnow.com for a free bottle and pay just $1 in shipping. harvestfreshnow.com. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.